我像没人像你给我瘦点啦。
就我拍东西全，你看我的照片看，我从来不 P，全部都是真实的。P的那个，你到时候你那个整得太过了，就不好看了嘛，是不是？你不然你站过去，我这个脾气咋嘛，没事出去酸的。
With the sound of the gong, Brother Stubborn makes his brilliant entrance. Xiong Changyu, a 40-year-old railway worker, calls himself a smiling bachelor who doesn't have much patience for the younger guests with their beauty cameras. He labels them vain and domineering, while positioning himself as an example of a mature man, someone who's seen enough of life to have his own views. His personal story was a maze of excuses and self-justifications. Xiong loved narrating his love life as a series of misfortunes where he was always the victim. His friends would ask why he was still single, and he had a ready answer for each one, as if he'd rehearsed a speech for every occasion. He shared these tales with relish, like someone unfolding a map full of details to show where he'd been. He explained that his relationships were cut short when his mother fell ill. According to him, he devoted himself entirely to caring for her, setting aside any chance at romance. It was a tough time, and he spoke of it with the tone of someone who did what had to be done, even if it came at a cost. He admitted to being a bit domineering and stubborn, acknowledging that it might complicate things with someone, but he seemed to see it as just part of who he was. His mother's illness lasted only 2 years, but for Xiong, that time seemed to freeze his romantic life. He recounted this part with a special weight, as if those years had left a lasting mark. After that, he carried this experience as a natural explanation for his solitude, something that came up in conversation almost without him noticing. He was determined to join blind dates, and he had clear requirements for a partner. 30 years old, about 1.60 meters tall, and with a reasonable appearance. He knew what he wanted and didn't hide it. For Xiong, it was like picking something that fit just right into what he pictured, with little room for surprises. Liao Xiao, the guest, was quite different from what he had in mind. An unemployed woman who used to work in a factory earning between 5,000 and 6,000 a month, she arrived with a hopeful view of relationships. Liao believed older men were more caring and understanding, and she brought that idea with her, like someone who still trusts things can work out. When the date began, Xiong treated it like a personal performance. He tried to impress with what he called poetry, a series of metaphors about heart doors and hesitant entrances that he recited with enthusiasm. The narrator noted that, without warning, someone might think it was an experimental song, the kind that plays in the background while you try to figure out what's going on. He seemed to enjoy expressing himself this way, adding a personal touch to the talk. His conversation was an exercise in contradictions. He spoke about being 30 with the energy of someone who still feels young, asking aloud if he wasn't too young for certain things. When Liao brought up age, he shifted to talk about his optimistic mindset, as if he wanted to show that time didn't fully define him. The economic discussion brought a different idea. Without a house of his own, Xiong suggested, we could buy a house together, saying it with a natural ease that felt well thought out. He presented it as a practical solution, something that made sense in his head, like someone offering a straightforward fix to a problem. He suggested both their names go on the property certificate, saying that if women thought this way, the world would be at peace. For him, it was a logical way to see things, blending romance with a bit of planning, as if love could come with a set of instructions. The host, noticing the mood getting a little heavy, tried to help. He suggested Xiong be more attentive, maybe buy a drink or make a simple gesture. He wanted to lighten things up, like a mediator keeping the conversation on track. Off camera, Xiong was more direct. To the director, he said he didn't feel much chemistry, explaining that Liao wasn't quite what he had in mind. But when the cameras rolled, he changed, turning into the ideal partner, responsible and straightforward, as if he knew what he needed to do to look good in front of everyone. The photo session was a moment of its own, and here's where things got interesting. Xiong, who called himself an artist, photographed Liao with a style all his own, straight angles, firm poses, like he was capturing something serious. He took each shot seriously, adjusting the camera with care, trying to catch what he thought worked. But Liao had a little secret. The photos she'd shown before the date were, let's say, generously touched up. With those magic filters that turn anyone into a movie star, she looked a tad different from what Xiong was now seeing through his lens. He kept clicking away, oblivious to the fact that he was photographing the unfiltered version of reality. Liao complained about the poses and the pictures, saying they didn't turn out how she hoped. Maybe because, without the filters, the results were a surprise even to her. Xiong stood by his work, explaining that this was how he saw things, holding firm to the idea that his photos had purpose, even if she wasn't a fan of the angle. He started presenting himself as a moral model, talking about how he thought female vanity, like those beauty cameras, was over the top. He said two people living together didn't need to chase perfection, and that he had principles he wouldn't budge on, like a solid foundation he carried with him. In the final moment, he declared loudly that a good man won't let his beloved woman get hurt, using strong words to show he cared, though they ended up sounding harsh to Liao. It was a line from the heart, but it didn't land quite as well as he'd pictured. The outcome was predictable. Liao said she didn't want to continue. Joking, she said, with the tone of someone who'd seen enough. Who'd find a partner so inflexible? That's just being fed up with living. She seemed ready to close that chapter right there. The date ended as it began, with Xiong believing in his own perfection and Liao disillusioned with yet another blind date experience. He stood firm in his ideas, while she walked away feeling that maybe real-life filters were trickier than the ones on her phone. More than just a TV event, that night turned into a portrait of modern relationship complexities, where individual expectations clash, where the search for genuine connection feels ever more distant. Between Liao's edited photos and Xiong's stiff poses, it was clear that not everything is what it seems at first glance.
And so wraps up another blind date tale, with Xiong and his railway poetry and Liao with her photos that, well, had a little digital fairy dust sprinkled on them. In the end, it's this mix of reality and expectation, him with his house buying plans, her with filters that don't hold up in daylight. It's a reminder that relationships, whether in China or anywhere else, are a game of adjustments where the camera lens or life itself doesn't always show the same picture. Share the video with friends, drop a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you next time.